Good afternoon and welcome to Candid Conversations, Zoomed in conversations. I'm speaking today with Jodi Krangle. She's a voice actor and also does a lot of other interesting things and works with sound on a regular basis. Welcome, Jodi. How are you? Can
I
you
am
hear me?
very good. Yes, I can hear you just fine. I just needed to find my unmute button, which is a typical problem these days.
Yeah, yeah. Gotta watch that mute button all the time. It
Yeah.
kind of gets you every now and then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, that's actually happened to me a few times when I was on the air back in the day when I was working in broadcasting. It's like,
Uh,
why is there no audio? Oh yeah, gotta
oh yeah.
make sure the mic's on.
Yeah.
Make sure the
Gotta
mic's
remember
on.
that.
Yeah, it's kind of a key thing in order to make things work. Uh,
Yes.
so you're a voice actor.
Mhm.
How did you get into that? How did you?
When I explain this to people who are not in Canada, they don't understand what I mean, and I have to like say the whole name out. But the CNIB, actually. So the Canadian National Institute for the Blind had a volunteer program for a long time where you would go in and record magazine articles onto reel-to-reel tape at the time. This was 95, 96.
Oh my,
So yeah, it was a bit of a time ago. And yeah, so I volunteered my time for a little bit doing that, and I just kind of fell in love with the whole process. Also, the tech of it, which I
mhm.
really understood and was interested in. So yeah, that just kind of was where the bug bit, and it percolated a little bit in the back of my mind for several years because I was doing SEO, search engine optimization, and internet marketing
Oh
for a
yes.
while when it first started. That's what I was doing up until about 2007. And then in 2007, I kind of got really bored. And yeah, the thing is that Google became the only game in town. And it just got boring to me. I didn't want to do it anymore. There was only so much I could do. And so I decided that was the time for me to start my journey into voiceovers. And because I was already self-employed, I just basically said, okay, so I was doing SEO and internet marketing. Now I'm doing voice acting. Just a focus switch. I
Yeah,
had a
just
lot to learn,
yeah. I
but
bet you
yeah,
did. I bet you
yeah,
did.
yeah.
What was one of the critical things you had to learn?
That I didn't know what I didn't know.
And do you know
That's
do you know what you know now?
Well, I still know that I don't know everything. Put it that way.
There's still a learning curve, isn't it?
It's definitely a learning process and you never stop learning. And really if you stop learning, life gets boring again.
Yeah, which is it can that's the reason why we want to sort of dive into little things and see what's going on and try
Yeah.
a new trick here and there,
Yeah.
try a new thing. And that's one of the other things I wanted to dive into is sound. Now I
Hmm.
know you've been working with a fellow by the name of Michael Schutz,
Yes.
and he's big on sound. I did an interview with him,
Hmm.
written one, of course, and we talked about the beeps in the hospitals and all those beep beep
Oh,
beep.
yes.
Yeah, and I know you guys were in a clubhouse uh, conversation. Tell us a little bit about what you talked about in that. What was the focus on that particular engagement?
Well, there were four people in that, and they all came from different disciplines within the healthcare industry and the music industry. So
Yeah.
Michael is a musician, really, but he started researching the ways that we could make the beeps in the hospitals a little more acceptable. And one of the things that he brings up is that a lot of these are notifications; they're not necessarily alarms. So if we rename them, then having them sound alarming no longer needs to be the case, if that makes any sense. So
Mhm.
just a different way of thinking at it, thinking of it. So that was one thing that he was raising the point of. And also when I spoke to him on my own podcast, because I have interviewed him for the audio branding podcast, we talked about the idea that these beeps are really harsh because they are machine sounds. And so if we take them from being just simple machine sounds that just start and end and there's no decay, then we make them a little more musical just by adding the echo, the decay on the end of the note, whatever it happens to be. It's much easier on our ears. So there are all sorts of things that you can discuss with that, but also, how do you make sure that the doctors and nurses and everyone who needs to pay attention to these does pay attention to them? Do they need to be really alarming? depending on what it is that you're listening to, and the psychology behind if we don't hear certain sounds, do we think they're working? So, like Dr. Joseph Schlesinger is a anesthesiologist, and he was also in on this, and he is also studying all the effects of this. But because of that, there's a sort of like sound that happens with the equipment that he uses,
Oh
and it
yeah.
doesn't really need to have that sound anymore, but it still does because the people working on those machines don't think it's working unless they hear that specific sound.
Hmm.
So there's a whole bunch of things to talk about, but yeah, there was psychology behind this, discussed the adoption by the doctors and nurses and how that could possibly come to be, and the standards that the industry machines need to adhere to now,
Yeah.
and the different things that are happening to hopefully change that. The fact that we're hurting ourselves with those sounds.
Oh, they are ear piercing at times when you walk into a hospital, as he was saying, it's like a hellscape of noise and
Yes, a beeping hellscape.
escape
This is
of
what his mother-in-law called it that. His
yeah,
mother-in-law is a nurse. Yeah.
yeah, beeping hellscape.
Yep.
Uh, Now, in your line of work, sound is critical, isn't
Hmm.
it? For voice acting, you got to make sure that everything sort of fits together. How does that transcend into what you do as a voice actor? How does sound play a role?
Well, the reason that I started my own podcast on the subject is basically because I wanted to know what I was contributing to as far as the branding of a company was concerned, because that's a lot of why they use my voice. I don't do animation video games or any of that, stuff that's maybe a little more Hollywood.
You
uh,
don't do
I
you don't do that. You don't do the stitch.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that, the people who do that are super talented and
Right.
good on them. I'm not saying it's bad work to get, because wow, it's fantastic, and
Hmm.
yeah. But it's not work I do. What I tend to do is the advertising, marketing, branding end of things. So
Hmm.
I tend to focus on commercials and corporate narration, which again lends itself very much to a brand's marketing and advertising and branding. So when it comes to the brand, what you want to do is you want to follow through with your visuals, with your audio, just so that there's a tie-in, so that your clientele, the people that you want to experience your brand, are experiencing a whole package as opposed to just one part of that package. So when people hire me for my voice, it's because my voice fits their branding, and that's a sound that they want.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to know why they would do that, what considerations were happening before they decided on that. And I wanted to talk with the creative directors and the audio branding companies that actually do this as a full-time thing. And yeah, I've learned a ton just asking questions.
Hmm.
And I am by no means an expert in the subject. I'm just sort of a fellow traveler, I like to say. So I ask the questions that I think my audience might want to ask if they were there.
Yeah, and that's an important thing because
Mhm.
obviously you want to get it right when you're doing the actual work, the voiceover itself.
Totally.
Um, and you're going into now. Do you actually go into companies themselves and do the work in house in a company, like say in a showroom at a car dealership? You
No,
actually
not usually. Not
no.
usually. They
Okay.
pre-record a lot of these things, so I do stuff in my own studio, which you can see behind me.
Right. Yeah.
And I just record it there and then send it off to them, and then they do whatever processing they want, add it to a video, put
Mhm.
music on it, all of that. My whole thing with what I'm contributing to is that I want to make sure the people producing these videos and these projects
Mhm.
are actually thinking about the sound from the beginning, as opposed to just tacking it on at the end without any thought. Because I mean, yeah, you can have lovely visuals for a video, but if you don't give some thought to the music you're going to put behind that, the sound effects, the voice that you might want on top of that, it's not really going to sound like a cohesive whole. And if you plan at least the music from the very beginning, you can make that music follow through with the visuals that are displaying, as opposed to just using some pre recorded license free music directory piece that you got that you can move around, but you can't really create it to work with your visuals.
It doesn't
There's
fit.
just, yeah, there's just more that you can do with music that's made specifically for you. Kind of like the voiceovers. If you've chosen a voice that really fits your branding, then you can make it sound the way that you want your brand to sound. It's
Hmm.
very personalized. And I think that's really important as far as reaching your audience is concerned, whoever that is, your client, your customer, B2B, like, whoever it is that you're talking to, you need to sound authentic. And
Hmm.
the way to be authentically you is to give that audio some thought.
And I guess that's the real process, is
Yeah.
thinking about what it is that brand is about, and then going and putting that all together and putting it down onto a track, and then
Hmm.
saying, here it is. Now, do you actually also consult with the company that's putting together this and saying, okay, you might want to put it in this particular frame of the shot, or is it just basically you send it off and let them work it out?
Yeah, I'm not the video person, so I don't pretend to manipulate the video in any way.
Right. Okay.
I am the voice person, and I'm not even the person who adds the music, so or the sound effects. So that I stay in my lane as far as that's concerned.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I do like to hear the music that they're thinking of using beforehand, just because that can get the tone that I use in my voiceovers very quickly. So I know exactly what emotional context they're trying to give to that film, and I can fit my voice in there.
Yeah, that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
Kind of a critical thing.
Yeah.
What what's the what one of the questions I always like to ask anybody in the written form, of course, is what's a thing that's really cool to you to do with regard to your work? What's the coolest thing about your job?
I do love lending my voice to a brand, just letting, feeling as if my voice is contributing to a brand is something that I really, really enjoy. So some of the things that I really love doing are those, this is who we are and we're proud videos that you
Hmm.
see all over websites everywhere. So I've done that for Dell, for Bose, for Mitre, for BBVA, a whole bunch of different clients have asked me to do that, and they all have subtle differences because they're in different industries, of course. But there's something that they have in common in that they all want to have that certain sound of um, you know involved pride,
Mm.
in that they want whoever's listening to that to understand that this is what their company does, and they're really proud of what they do, and that they think they can help you. That's the point of these videos, and I love being able to get that emotional context for them. And
Right.
it's so much fun. I love doing it particularly for travel and tourism, because that is, I mean, especially now when it's just starting to come back, right?
Yeah, yeah. Everybody's like,
Yeah.
let's get on a train, let's go somewhere.
Yeah, but convincing people to do that can be hard, and really making a place that they're considering going or a way that they're considering traveling enticing is part of what I do with my voice. That's part of the job.
Yeah, and I guess that's also a thing that you want to consistently drive to your clientele. So it's like, my product is my voice,
Yeah.
and you know, how do you, like, when you engage with them? Do you actually give them samples of what you've done, so they get an idea of what it is you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. There are demos all over my website, and also some of them ask me to do auditions. So they'll give me the copy, and I'll give them a quick version of what I think it could be, and
Mm.
then I'll take direction from them. And they might be hearing from several other voice actors who are also auditioning. So I may not get the job in the end, and that's what happens.
Well, that's the life of somebody working in your field,
Yeah,
right? It's always interesting.
yeah. You're
Getting
never guaranteed anything.
No, no, not at all. But getting back to this sound thing that you were dealing with, or talking about
Mhm.
in that Clubhouse video, um, is that a secondary thing, or is that kind of connected to what you're doing?
You mean Clubhouse in general, or?
Like, not Clubhouse, but I mean with Professor Schutz. Which,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
eh,
it is part of, it's not a service that I offer. Just, putting that out there. I don't want anyone to come to me and ask me to consult on that. That's not something I do. But I have a podcast called Audio Branding. And in the podcast, I talk about how sound influences us.
mhm.
So it's how it influences us in our buying decisions, definitely, but also in our daily lives. So healing and sound is a huge topic. And I do a lot of things on healing and sound. And Dr. Schatz was definitely a good person to talk to about that.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing that podcast for?
It started in November of 2019, so I am actually up to episode 137.
Wow. And where can most people find that episode? Or
That particular episode I'd have to look up, but I can tell you that if you go to audiobrandingpodcast.com,
mhm,
you'll find all of the episodes there,
mhm.
and it should be fairly easy to find. But yeah,
Are you also on the Apple podcast as well? Or
yes, I'm
and all?
everywhere that podcasts are heard. Yes.
Ah, yeah, good. I have a particular one that I like that I use, and so yeah, for sure. And your website is also a pretty cool place to look at. What's the website address for people who might be interested in doing some work with you?
Sure, that's at voiceoversandvocals.com.
Do you have any other socials that you want to plug here?
I'm on I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter under just Jodi Krangle. If you look for me, you'll find me there. And also on Clubhouse, we have a regular Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern room that happens on various different topics. And that happens every week. And then on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, I have a chat that I do with a couple of colleagues of mine, Anne Ganguza and Cheryl Halling, and we are all voice actors, but we all also have podcasts. So we're talking about voices in podcasting. It's called VIP. So yeah, we just talk about where those two things kind of meet in the middle and talk about both of them, and we have a lot of fun. It's a good time.
Yeah, I bet. I the only other podcast I listen to that's from a voiceover personality is Moxie Manouche. I don't know if you've heard the name, but
Yeah, is her Your Brain on Facts? Is that?
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, and
Yeah, yeah.
she's quite interesting to listen to as
Hmm.
well. And I find her very. I tried to get an interview with her, but unfortunately didn't come through. But
Mm,
I'm happy to be able to get this done because I think it's important to talk about sound, how it affects us, and so on. Because as you mentioned, it helps us buy things. It can heal us, but it can
hmm.
also hurt us if it's not done right.
Exactly.
So it's a really critical thing, and I really appreciate you taking the time out today to visit with me here on Candid Conversations to
Happy to.
talk about this. We'll get this posted up on
Mhm.
our YouTube channel and also on the blog at 101candidconversations.blogspot.com. And that's going to be shortly after, of course, we end here. But really
Sure.
appreciate you, Jodi. I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I have to try and end.
Yeah. Oh, you raised your hand.
I did. I might have to trim the video.
I think you're gonna have to. It's all
Oh,
good.
all right. So I'll end the meeting here and I'll trim that video. But
Okay.
thanks again for doing that. I'm gonna stop it. There we go. There's where you stop.